Before this video gets underway, I want to get something abundantly clear. I love Counter-Strike, and I love the potential that this game has, but Counter-Strike 2 has been in an absolute state since launch, and I wanted to give my 2 cents on the situation. I wouldn't normally make this style of video, but I'm making it because I've reached a point where these problems are affecting whether or not I actually want to play Counter-Strike. I'll start by addressing the elephant in the room, and what I imagine affects the most of the player base. The cheating problem. I refuse to refer to it as a hacking problem because, let's be fair, most people are just paying a $5 to download some cheap shit to spin in Premiere. Speaking of which, my experience in Premiere, especially since the start of Season 5, has been absolutely dismal, and these seems to be the same sentiment echoed across the world, across a plethora of ranks, and has seemingly zero end in sight. Don't get me wrong, Counter-Strike has always had a bit of a cheating problem due to the relatively low barrier of entry compared to the dopamine that a cheater may receive. But for the first time in a long time, I'm seeing players acting as righteous vigilantes against cheating, only toggling once they've confirmed that a player is cheating, and then turning them off again once a cheater has been kicked. It was such a surreal experience for me, especially because prior to about Season 3 of Premiere, I hadn't seen a blatant cheater in what felt like months. These days, however, it feels like I can barely play the game without having to risk playing cheaters. Now, I'm a relatively high rank player, sitting around 25k elo while still in my placements, and between LEM and Global on most maps in competitive, and this feels borderline unplayable at the moment. Most games have at least one level 30 no badge player with 16 matches played, and they're all just absolute savants. This brings me swiftly onto another incredibly frustrating problem with CS2. The fact that deathmatch, arms race, and even retakes are becoming downright unplayable due to the prominence of cheating bots. While I don't have any way to say for sure, I'm assuming that the reason these bots exist is to simply farm weekly drops and armory pass stars for profit. And this is where I have to admit that I don't actually have a clever solution. Perhaps we could lock CS2 behind a paywall like we used to have? That had the knock-on effect that it could also reduce cheating, just by creating another barrier of entry that a cheater might have to overcome. But the problem with this approach, however, is that Valve already made the choice to make CSGO free-to-play, and then enabled players to earn Prime status for free, and now those accounts are simply just a dime a dozen, so perhaps it wouldn't actually help that much. Valve just need to pull the metaphorical finger out and find a way to tackle this bot problem once and for all. This brings me to the matchmaking system, and specifically how it works, or more accurately, how it doesn't. Explain to me how matchups like this happen in a lobby with the globals. What is this player doing here? They clearly can't hold their own, so why has matchmaking allocated them here? It's not even like I'm playing at inopportune times. This was 3 PM on a Saturday on London servers. Either the game is struggling for players more than it already feels, or something else is going on here. Now, I don't want to just rant or complain without at least offering a solution. My proposal would be as follows. Remove the rating system, or at least tie it back to the original ranks for Premiere. The rank distribution could look like this. I also don't mind the numbered rating, but again, there's no reason why we couldn't have tied that into the rank. That way, you could see that a DMG player with 20.5 rating is ranked lower than a DMG player ranked 21.2k. They're both within the rank boundary, but still able to make the leaderboard relevant. I think this kind of transparency with the ranks would work very well in Valve's favour, as I recall people begging for more transparent matchmaking all the way back in CSGO. This gives the people the best of both worlds. You can see how good you are compared to other players within the same rank, as well as being able to say that you're DMG as opposed to 20k elo. It feels like it has much more personality this way. As a result of making Premiere more akin to CSGO matchmaking, you could then revert the individually ranked competitive to unranked matchmaking. That way you offer a more casual experience, but for the players who perhaps don't wish to engage with casual mode, which is exactly where I'd place myself, but I'd also leave some sort of hidden ranking, but move the boundaries much wider than within regular Premiere. Maybe allow people with a hidden rank of Master Guardian 1 to play with people up to Global, for example. This way, the players that want to grind have a place to do so with Premiere, and the true hyper-casuals have Deathmatch and Casual mode to play with. Furthermore, we've started to see some strange updates to gameplay over the last few months and years. Firstly, was the addition of the loadout system over the buy wheel. Nobody asked for this. Why replace what already worked? They could have even adjusted it to allow for more weapons or custom weapon slots. There was very little reason to limit us to just 5 weapons for each category. Secondly, was the ammo change. This was nearly universally disliked, and yet they've opted to keep it in. It's not harsh enough that it makes a meaningful impact, and yet it's just annoying to occasionally deal with. I feel like they could have just adjusted the magazine counts on the weapons that were buffed as a result, such as the R8 and the CZ, and nerfed the others. This felt like making change for change's sake, and for seemingly very little benefit or otherwise. Finally is the bomb change. Now, this is an update that, again, nobody asked for, but I actually like. I think an update to the bomb mechanics was long overdue, and the shockwave was very nicely implemented, especially with the new interactions it has with smokes. I dislike the flashing HUD element, as this has always felt like a bit of a skill check to me, but honestly, I can live with it. It's not a deal breaker for me. The main thing to take away here though is that change itself isn't the problem we're facing. Instead, it's badly prioritised change that is having a negative impact, and it's important to distinguish the difference. Another problem I have right now is the seeming over-reliance on skins. Valve already make an absolute killing through the digital arms deal of pretty pixels, but why have they become such a perceived focus? Skin updates are being announced months in advance, with the armory being such a focal point these days. I understand CS2 is a free-to-play game, with server costs and overhead that it has to reach, but it's already raking in millions a day, and it's not like Valve are putting much effort into the skins market themselves. They're just taking community-made skins and just bundling them all together and releasing them with fanfare to the community. We're absolutely sending the wrong message to Valve regarding what we want to see more of. By spending as much as we are, we're basically advertising to them that we're happy to spend even more money, and that must have a knock-on effect with their update priority. Why should they focus more on releasing new maps when they could just release more skins? One of those options definitely pays better than the other. And don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely part of the problem. I'd be foolish to claim otherwise. But the people of Counter-Strike need to understand. We must vote with our wallets on this one. If Valve start making less money, they'll sit up and notice, and it's probably the most direct way we have of getting Valve's attention. Finally is a real gripe I have, the problem with the map pool. Why do we keep shuffling out the least played map each season? This is such an absurdly stupid way to freshen up the map pool, as it already feels stale season to season. This season is by far the worst offender though, and don't get it twisted, I love Cache and its re-addition to the game. In fact, I think it's probably one of the best versions we've ever had. However, it should not have replaced Overpass. Overpass's struggles as a map come from the fact that it's quite large and requires a large amount of team coordination to win. You're unlikely to get that in Premiere or even Face It, but that means that Valve should look at either Overpass and how they can reduce that fact, or leave it alone as a reward for players willing to commit to learning it. As far as I'm concerned, the maps selected for Premiere and consequently Pro Play boil down to one of two options. You have complicated maps, and you have straightforward maps. And for a game like Counter-Strike to succeed, I believe we need a good balance of both. Too many 3-lane maps, and every map starts to feel the same. Too many maps like Nuke, and you start to alienate that Counter-Strike feeling of simplicity. With the map pool currently, it feels like the scale is tipped way too far to the 3-lane map end of the scale. I'd go as far to say that the only complicated in the maps right now are Nuke and arguably Anubis. Mirage, Dust 2, Inferno, Ancient and Cache all follow a far simpler layout and design, and that leads to far too much repetition and ultimately boredom. Now, am I screaming for the minus Mirage that we've all been praying for? No, but I do believe it needs a facelift, and a season or two out of Pro Play would do it some good. The same goes for Inferno, while it gets the tweaking to its balancing that it needs, and where better to test that than in an unrated game mode. Dust 2, while iconic, doesn't need to be in the same map pool as Ancient, as they're fundamentally very similar maps. And I think you get my point. We need maps that are either designed new from the ground up for CS2, or older maps need to be reworked in such a way that they fit with a more modern style of play. One map I think could fit perfectly into the system would be Tuscan. I think it's been missing from Pro Play for a long time, and that would be interesting to see how a remade version of it would look, while also having a more interesting layout and having that all-important nostalgia factor for older players. For me, personally, I'd make the map pool look something similar to this. A revamped version of Mirage, Ancient, Nuke, Tuscan, Cache, a reworked version of Train, and another new map. Perhaps Cobble, for all of you screaming at me for not mentioning it earlier. Maybe I'm cooking, maybe I'm not. But what I'm proposing here is change, and I think that's the important first step to a better map pool. To wrap up, I feel for my fellow Counter-Strike players. There's an overwhelming feeling of neglect and just a somber tone towards the state of the game right now. There's some of you out there that will disagree with what I've said, and are having an absolute blast with the game right now, and for those people, I'm so glad that you're able to enjoy our beautiful game. But for those of you who perhaps play a little more regularly, or is grinding as hard as you can, I want you to know that I see you, I feel your pain, and only by making noise and offering solutions can we incite change. Recently, you may have seen on Twitter people encouraging others to change their reviews on Steam in a bid to get Valve to notice that people are unhappy, and I hope that it's working. I've personally changed my review, and hundreds of others have done so too, and we've actually changed the Steam recent reviews to mostly positive from very positive. That may feel like a small change, but it's an important first step to getting everyone speaking from the same script. So if you take nothing else away from this video, I implore you to be vocal and let your voices be heard. Only together can we make the changes we want to see, and make Counter-Strike 2 into the beautiful game we know it can be. I don't want Counter-Strike to fail, and I hate seeing it in the state that it's in, but I wouldn't have made this video if I didn't feel strongly about it. I love Counter-Strike, and it's been such a big part of my life over the last decade. CS2 has such potential to be the ultimate version of Counter-Strike, but as it stands, that potential is being squandered. I don't expect Valve to implement everything I've mentioned here, and I'm 90% sure they won't even see this video, or like any of the ideas I've proposed, but that's not the point. I want them to listen, and I want them to reflect on the state of the game. I appreciate that this video has been a little different, and I don't expect everyone to agree with everything I've said, but if anything I've said during this video has resonated with you, or even if you disagree with anything I've said, I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. And before I go, if you've enjoyed this video, or would like to see any of my other content, be it similar to this video or my more historical videos, I'd really appreciate you subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.